Aristotle brings up the subject of wealth and ownership early in his Politics, beginning with the statement, "In the first place, then, someone may doubt whether the getting of money is the same thing as economy, or whether it is a part of it, or something subservient to it, and if so, whether it is as the art of making shuttles is to the art of weaving, or the art of making brass to that of statue founding, for they are not of the same service. For the one supplies the tools, the other the matter. By the matter I mean the subject out of which the work is finished, as wool for the cloth and brass for the statue." From this, as Aristotle argues, it's clear that the accumulation of wealth is not identical to household management, since the goal of one lies in supplying the tools the other puts to use. Within the household, it is only the domestic art, what we call economy, that governs its organization, though whether wealth acquisition is a division of this or belongs to a separate field remains uncertain. If gathering resources is about understanding how to obtain wealth and possessions, and if these stem from many sources, then the first question should be whether agriculture itself falls under the pursuit of wealth or is distinct from it, and in general, whether this division applies to all ways of acquiring or preparing provisions. Living beings, both human and animal, rely on various kinds of nourishment, and because existence depends on food, the ways creatures live differ greatly. Some animals group together, others live alone, whichever suits their needs best in securing sustenance. There are carnivores, frugivores, and those who consume whatever they encounter. According to Aristotle, nature has set the course for each kind, enabling them to survive with ease in their own way. And since not all creatures find the same things pleasant or edible, each follows a lifestyle suited to their preferences. For instance, animals that live on flesh will have lives that differ entirely from those that subsist on fruit, and so too with human beings, their ways of living vary widely. Among them, the shepherd leads perhaps the most effortless life, feeding on domesticated animals and doing little else, though he must move often to keep up with the herds, as though tending a living, mobile farm. Others sustain themselves by dominating animals, some hunting one kind, some another, while others depend on fish from rivers, lakes, or the sea, or capture birds and wild beasts. Still, most humans live by working the land and harvesting its produce. Those who follow what nature seems to intend, providing for themselves through labor rather than through exchange or commerce, include shepherds, farmers, poachers, fishers, and trappers. Some of them combine trades to make their lives easier and more self-sufficient. One man may be both herder and raider, another both tiller and huntsman. In this way, they cover what they lack through varied activity, shaped not by choice but by necessity. Nature appears to have equipped all living creatures with the means to sustain themselves, both at the moment of their coming into existence and later as they grow and mature. In the earliest stage, many creatures are already nourished within the womb, continuing to receive sustenance until they are able to feed on their own, like certain insects or birds. Those animals that give birth to live offspring provide nourishment for a while through their own bodies, most notably by producing milk. From this, says Aristotle, we can reasonably infer that everything in the natural order exists with a purpose. Plants are meant to serve animals, and animals, in turn, are meant to serve humans. Domesticated animals clearly exist for our use and nourishment, while wild animals, at least most of them, serve useful purposes too, whether as food or as sources of materials like clothing. Since nature does nothing without purpose and leaves nothing incomplete, it follows that these resources exist for human benefit. Thus, what people acquire through war may be viewed as a natural gain, particularly because war often includes hunting, which is itself a necessity in defending against or capturing wild beasts. And when people who are, by their nature, meant to be subordinates refuse to accept that role, conflict arises that can be seen as justified by nature itself. Therefore, only those methods of acquisition that align with nature are properly considered part of household management. These are the resources that should be immediately available or easily obtained, namely, whatever is required for survival and beneficial both to private households and public life. True wealth, in this view, lies in the possession of such essentials. The pursuit of what is needed for a well-lived life has its limits. even though poets like Solon suggest otherwise with lines such as, "No bounds to riches can be fixed for man." Yet, just as in every other craft or skill, limits do exist. No tool of any art is boundless in size or number. Wealth, too, should be seen as a collection of tools used for managing the home and governing the community. From this, as Aristotle writes, it becomes clear that obtaining what is naturally necessary plays a rightful role in both domestic and civic life, and we now understand why this is so. There is also a different type of acquisition, often referred to as pecuniary, and rightly so, for it appears to have no clear limit in terms of wealth. Many people, due to its resemblance to the natural kind of acquisition, assume they are the same, but they are actually distinct, though not entirely unrelated. One arises naturally, while the other stems from human skill or technique. This distinction is worth examining more closely. Every possession has two kinds of use, both based on its nature, but in different ways. One use is inherent, the other is more external. Take a shoe, for example. It can be worn or traded for something else. Both are valid uses of the shoe, yet trading it is not its primary purpose. Shoes were originally made to be worn, not to be used as items of exchange. This principle applies broadly. Most goods have a natural use and a secondary one tied to trade. The practice of exchange began in a natural way. Some people had more of what they needed, others had less, so they swapped to balance their needs. From this, it becomes clear that selling necessities for money is not the original or natural function of these goods. Initially, in the earliest and most basic communities like households, exchange had no place, because everything was shared. It was only once groups grew larger and began separating from each other that trade became necessary. People began to exchange things they both required but did not equally possess. Even in Aristotle's time, this early form of barter still existed among certain more isolated communities, where goods were traded directly, like wine for grain, without involving money. This type of exchange is consistent with nature and isn't a form of wealth-seeking, but simply a practical method for securing essential needs. Over time, however, barter gave rise to the need for money. Because the locations where one could acquire or sell goods were often far apart, it became inconvenient to rely solely on direct exchange. Not all useful things are easy to transport, which led to the creation of money, something mutually accepted, valuable in itself, and easy to carry. Metals like iron or silver served this purpose, or anything similar that could be traded easily. At first, their value depended on weight or size alone, but eventually a mark or stamp was introduced to represent their value directly, making transactions easier without the need to weigh them each time. Once money had been established as the necessary medium of exchange, a new form of acquiring wealth began to emerge, one based on buying and selling. It likely started in a basic and straightforward way, but over time developed into a more refined practice, involving greater knowledge of where and how to gain the most profit. For this reason, the pursuit of wealth through trade came to be seen as a distinct activity, focused on knowing which opportunities yield the highest return, making it an effective means of gathering wealth and possessions. As a result, many began to equate wealth with the amount of money someone holds, since all commercial dealings are conducted through it and fortunes can be built by its use. Others, however, view money differently, regarding it as having no inherent value, but being valuable only because of collective agreement. If people were to change their view of it, it would lose its worth, as it serves no purpose in fulfilling the essential needs of life. Indeed, it often happens that someone rich in money still lacks basic sustenance, and it cannot be said that a person is truly well off when they could, despite their possessions, starve to death. This resembles the story of Midas, whose endless desire turned everything he touched into gold, leaving him without what he actually needed. Because of this, Aristotle argues, some pursue different forms of wealth and property, and rightly so, since nature does offer other kinds of valuable goods. These are the true concern of household management, whereas trade focuses on acquiring money, not in every possible way, but specifically through exchange. This is the primary aim and outcome of commerce, to gain money, and there seems to be no natural limit to the amount that may be accumulated through this activity. In this, trade resembles other crafts, such as medicine, which has no final limit in its aim to secure health, or other arts, where practitioners continually seek to expand the reach of their skill. Yet, while the goals of these arts may stretch indefinitely, the tools and resources needed to achieve them are limited, and it is within those boundaries that each art must operate. In the pursuit of wealth, there appears to be no natural stopping point, since its goal lies in the accumulation of money and goods. However, household management does have its limits, and differs from this other pursuit in its purpose. The aim of managing a household is not to gather riches endlessly, yet the two activities are so closely related that they often become confused, and one is mistaken for the other. Both deal with money, but with different intentions. The one seeks it only as a means to obtain life's necessities, while the other seeks it for its own sake, as an end in itself. Because of this confusion, many come to believe that the endless collection of wealth is the very aim of household management, and they devote themselves to storing up money without limit. This tendency is rooted in a desire not so much to live well, but simply to keep on living, and because this desire knows no end, the means to support it are pursued without end as well. Even those who speak of living well often understand that only as indulging in physical pleasures. Since such pleasure appears to depend on what one owns, they fix all their effort on acquiring more money. This, in turn, gives rise to yet another version of money-getting, because the pleasures they seek are excessive, and they believe they must secure an equally excessive supply of resources to sustain them. When trading alone does not satisfy this craving, they turn to other means, misusing skills meant for higher ends. Qualities like bravery, for example, were meant to produce steadfastness, not profit. Neither the craft of the soldier nor the practice of medicine was designed to gain wealth, but to bring about victory or health. Yet some people twist every art toward financial gain, as though all things exist only to serve that one goal, and everything must be judged according to it. So far, then, we have looked at the form of wealth-getting that goes beyond necessity, and how people came to desire it. We have also considered the kind that truly is necessary, which is distinct in both aim and scope. The natural kind of household economy, focused on securing food and meeting essential needs, is not without limit, but has its proper measure. Aristotle concludes that the question of whether money-getting properly belongs to the role of the household manager or statesman has now been resolved. While it may not be their central task, it is nevertheless an essential one. Just as the political leader does not create people but receives them from nature and guides them toward their proper ends, so too must the earth, sea, or some other natural source provide for their needs, and it is the role of the head of a household to manage these resources wisely. The weaver, for example, does not spin the yarn, but uses it and chooses what is suitable and effective from what is not. Similarly, one might ask why wealth acquisition should be considered part of household management, while medicine is not, given that maintaining health is as important for a household as providing food and other necessities. In truth, both the master of a household and the ruler of a city must, to some extent, concern themselves with health, but not in every detail. That remains the physician's duty. In the same way, handling money is in some aspects the task of the household manager, but in others, it belongs to the servant. Ultimately, Aristotle argues, it is nature's responsibility to provide nourishment, for all living things draw sustenance from what produced them. Hence, natural wealth for human beings comes primarily from fruits and animals. Since there are two kinds of money-making, as Aristotle concludes, it serves two distinct aims. One is for the sustenance of the household, the other for retail trade. The former is both necessary and praiseworthy, while the latter deserves criticism. It does not arise from nature, but from human interaction, and involves gaining from others. Of all forms of wealth acquisition, lending at interest is most justly condemned, as it involves making money grow from money itself, rather than using it as a means of fair exchange. This is reflected even in the name given to interest, which implies reproduction or birth. Just as children resemble their parents, interest is seen as money reproducing itself. For this reason, it stands out as the most unnatural method of acquiring wealth. After having explored the foundational aspects of the subject, Aristotle turns to its practical side, one part being a noble exercise for the intellect, the other driven by necessity. These considerations are essential for effectively managing one's household. A person must understand the kinds of livestock that yield the most benefit, and where and how to raise them best. This includes knowing whether horses, cattle, sheep, or other animals will offer greater returns, and being able to judge which animals hold greater value in different regions, as some thrive better in certain places than others. Likewise, knowledge of farming is vital, how to care for cultivated land, orchards and groves, and the keeping of bees, the breeding of fish, and the rearing of birds, all of which can contribute to profit. These represent the fundamental and most natural aspects of household management. When it comes to acquiring wealth through trade, the most prominent path is commerce, which may take one of several forms: selling goods by transporting them across the sea, moving them over land, or selling them where they are produced. These approaches vary in terms of profit and security. Some offer greater gain, others greater stability. Another way of making money is through lending, which involves interest. A third path involves earning wages, whether through practicing a lowly trade or through sheer physical labor. There also exists a way of building wealth that lies between this and commerce. It involves both natural sources and exchange. This includes resources that come directly from the earth or are derived from it, such as timber or the broad field of mining, which covers a wide array of materials extracted from below the ground. Even if these things do not bear fruit in the literal sense, they are nonetheless valuable and serve human needs. Aristotle points out that what has been discussed so far provides a general outline, and while going into detail on each particular matter might benefit practitioners, it would be tedious to elaborate here. Among all forms of craftsmanship, the finest are those in which chance plays the smallest role, while the lowest are those that corrupt the body. The most servile are those that rely solely on physical strength, and the most unrefined are those that require the least degree of skill. Yet since various authors of Aristotle's time, such as Chas of Peros and Apollodorus of Lemnos, have written on farming and planting, and others on related subjects, Aristotle suggests that it is better for those interested in the details to consult their works. Beyond that, Aristotle writes, anyone interested in the acquisition of wealth should pay attention to useful remarks they come across, since many who have succeeded in this pursuit have done so by taking advantage of such insights. Aristotle mentions a striking example, that of Thales of Miletus, whose success is often cited as evidence of philosophical ingenuity. When mocked for his lack of wealth and told that philosophy was of no practical use, he is said to have applied his knowledge of the stars to foresee an abundant olive harvest in the coming season. Still in winter, and with only a modest sum at his disposal, he placed deposits on all the olive presses in Miletus and Chios, securing them cheaply since no one else was competing. When the harvest arrived and demand for the presses surged, he rented them out on his own terms, making a considerable profit. In doing so, he showed that philosophers can attain wealth if they so desire, but that their aims lie elsewhere. His method, while attributed to his wisdom, relied on a general strategy that could succeed broadly. Monopolizing a resource, as Thales did, tends to be a lucrative tactic. Even cities sometimes adopt this approach when in need of funds, taking control of certain commodities. A notable case is that of a man in Sicily who used money entrusted to him to buy up all the available iron from local merchants. When buyers from the markets arrived, they found no iron for sale except his. By increasing prices only moderately, he managed to double his capital. Dionysius, upon learning of this, allowed him to leave with his earnings, but barred him from remaining in Sicily, deeming his strategy incompatible with the interests of the state. His aim, Aristotle concludes, like that of Thales, was to create a monopoly for personal gain. Such examples, according to Aristotle, are also instructive for those involved in political life, since cities, even more than households, often face financial difficulties. For this reason, Aristotle says, some officials devote themselves exclusively to this aspect of public administration, using similar strategies to manage the economic needs of the state.